Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome in. There's so many different things I want to share with you guys today. There's a lot. We are going to be discussing the prominent things that are happening in the news right now. And we're going to talk about the Islamabad MOU, of course. We're going to talk about the conservative movement, JD Vance's appearances on Megyn Kelly specifically. We're going to hone on that because he talks more about Iran and the conservative movement. It's really, really good. So I thought that one would be interesting to bring into the conversation today because that is what's taking place right now, and we want to talk about the coalition. We got the midterms, so I thought all of that would be appropriate. And then I also want to hit on our Juneteenth. We're going to hit on that a little as well, and I will have a special guest to dissect all of that. But before we dive into those different headlines, I want to share with you guys something super special that I've been working on now since last year, and it's coming to fruition now this year. And it is my first ever book. It's One Nation Under God, 250th Anniversary of American Independence. It is a devotional, but it's very unique. So in this book, you will have a historical event. You're also going to have a reflection of that historical event, and you're going to have a prayer and a scripture for meditation. And then what I also wanted to do, since we're covering 251 years, because we're talking about 2026 as well, of history, I wanted to include sources that were public for you that you didn't have to buy a book for, buy resources for. So I tried to do my best in making sure the resources like history.com, Library of Congress, National Archives, those types of websites that are reliable was included in every single entry. So that way, if you wanted, if an entry or historical event impacted you very much, you wanted to dive more into that, you could do that by simply either copy and pasting that link into your browser, and then you can learn more about that by reading the article. So that being said, what I thought would be, 250 pages, I imagine, is now 286 because of so many sources that I had that I wanted to make available to the reader. So I'm very proud of this work because, number one, I never imagined myself doing anything like this. But as I got into politics last year, started to look at where our country was headed and the constant grievances we had about our nation when it comes to race and those things like that, in our just not being as proud and as patriotic of the nation as we should be. And I also found and understood that a lot of people weren't familiar with the spiritual foundation of this nation. And I think that's super important when you talk about 1776 and our Constitution and the Continental Congress, all of those amazing achievements. And also we have some setbacks. I'm not sugarcoating any of that. I want to follow my heavenly Father when it comes to this, which in the Bible he doesn't sugarcoat anything. We see some ugly, ugly moments. We see some moments that are amazing, right? And he shows us all of that. But the goal is to point it all back to us, because in our flaws, we have a God who's not flawed, who is holy, who is righteous, and who has a plan for those who seek him, right? The word of God says that those who come to him must believe that he, number one, exists, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Excuse me. So I'm proud of this right here. It comes as a lot of research, of months of putting it together. It's a lot of work, but it was really fun. I learned and fell in love with the history of America again. I wept over certain events. I prayed over certain things for this nation. And out of this, you will begin to have a great appreciation of this nation. I challenge people that if you think you are patriotic about this nation and you understand what you're in this for and what you're fighting for and what you want to leave to the next generation, read and get this book, because I feel like it'll challenge you even more. Number one, you'll be strengthened in your faith because you'll be able to see and pinpoint the providence of God in every single year from 1776 to 2026. You'll be able to you'll have that prayer, that reflection. But I think what it does is it brings you closer to your identity, your relationship with God, but then it also reveals to you the truth about what's taking place in our nation. Again, I don't sugarcoat any of the achievements or any of the horrific things that took place in our nation as well, but I think that there's a bigger thing happening here, and that is that we serve a God, and we know a God. I know a God who has, I feel, been in this story with us since the very beginning. And again, even though we had our founders who understood these principles and they wanted that to be a part, of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, as flawed men and women, we might not have lived up to those ideals. And what I like to describe this as, so we kind of have a better understanding, is what you constantly see throughout history is this balance between ideals and the reality of what was taking place in that time. But then that in that space you have all of these movements that begin to bring these two things together. And you have the civil rights movement, you have all of, our rights, our voting rights, our, being able to own land, and all of these things that took place to kind of bridge that gap to where we have that we're living more of the ideals that we set forth, and those principles that are, they're something to live up to, and what we are actually doing, believing, and living. So you'll see that throughout the entire history there. And I do want to read to you a little bit of it. Now, today was supposed to be the official release, but because this project is so big, it is going through a review on Amazon right now. And so, as soon as it is released, I will definitely make sure, if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you will be the first to know before I post on any socials that the book is live and you can go purchase it. You'll have the link to do that. And there will be a 40% off discount for you as well that you'll be able to take advantage of too. I know I'm just going to hold that discount because I know there's a lot of people that want to get their hands on it. So I'm planning on having that discount held until July 4th, because I really want you to get your hands on it. I want you to start reading and diving into this nation. This is not necessarily I wouldn't say it's a history book. It's not necessarily that, because we're talking about more of a devotional angle, even though there are historical events in it. So I want to read to you just my note from me that you'll see in the beginning of the book. I thought that this would be fitting for the time, just to give you guys a little bit of what's inside of this book, a little snippet, if you've been hanging on with me and waiting for the release of this. And I thank you guys for your prayers. I thank all the reviewers that took your time to review it and give me your endorsement, or, tell me what the sense you got of it. And there are people, I had English teachers that looked through it grammatically. I had experts look through the historical events and everything. So they were super, super helpful in making sure that we, as close to being accurate as we possibly can. But I want to read to you a note that I myself put together. Well, as soon as you get the book, you'll see this. I am not a historian. I am not a politician. I'm a regular person who loves Jesus and loves this country. And I wrote this devotional because I believe both of those things those things belong together. This nation was founded on Christian values. That is not a political opinion, it is a historical fact. The men who signed the Declaration of Independence appealed to a creator. The abolitionists who dismantled slavery were driven by the church. The civil rights leaders who marched for dignity preached from scripture time and again. When this nation has moved toward what is good, true, and right, it has been the people of God who led the way. This devotional is my love letter to both. To America with clear eyes that see the good, the bad, and the ugly without flinching, and to the God whose fingerprints are on all of it. My desire is simple: that you would finish this devotional more proud of your country, more rooted in your faith than you when you started. I want you to understand something that this culture is working very hard to make us forget. Your faith was never meant to be a private thing. It was never meant to be separate from how you vote, how you lead, how you raise your children, how you run your business, or how you engage in your community. The early church was called the ecclesia, the governing body. We were designed by God to be a people who bring his kingdom into every corner of life. Everything is spiritual. God holds it all. Politics, government, education, family, business, none of it is outside of his authority, and none of it should be outside of our engagement as his people. So as you read these pages, one for each year of this nation's life, I'm asking you to do three things: be proud of your country, be rooted in your faith, and fight for both with everything you have. This devotional is for every American believer, men and women alike, who refuses to let faith be pushed out of the public square. Cherish what was handed to you, remember what it cost, and resolve that on your watch it will not be lost. With love, faith, and fierce American pride. Me. So that's what you'll see in the very beginning. And then it goes into 1776, the Declaration of Independence, and you'll get that too. I thought to read this too, just so you get a kind of a gist of it. I kept the events as concise as I could without not leaving any important details out, so you kind of get the gist of the event, especially if you've never heard of it. I'm sure everybody heard of the Continental Congress 1776, how, because that's the founding, the when they put together our Constitution and things like that. So this one is the event on July 4th, 1776. The Second Continental Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence, proclaiming that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson was its primary author, drawing on Enlightenment philosophy and the natural law tradition rooted in Christian thought. 56 delegates risked their lives by signing it. Here's a reflection. The founders' appeal to a creator was not merely rhetorical, it was the bedrock of their argument. True freedom, they believed, was not granted by kings but by God. As people of faith today, we inherit this legacy, the understanding that our dignity comes not from any government or person, but from the one who has made us. When the world tries to define your worth, return to this foundation. You were created by a God who calls you free. And here's the prayer. Lord, thank you for the gift of freedom, not just national, but spiritual. Help me never take lightly what was bought at great cost. May I live as someone who knows their worth comes from you alone. Amen. And then the scripture I have is Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. I'll digress there. So when you go through it, I feel you'll probably, depending on how emotional you get, you have tears. I know I had tears writing some of it, especially the 2025 one with Charlie Kirk. That's also in there. And I break that down as well. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. I'm going to digress and move on. So that you'll get that through the whole sense of the book. I'm so proud of it because I'm happy of the reviews that I've got. So I'm going to share that with you too. I'm going to just share with you 2 reviews that I got, and then we'll move into all the other things that are happening in our nation. So I had people review it, give me their feedback again, because I wanted to make sure that what I had written and the purpose of it and what I want people to understand and get from it was actually gotten. So here is 2 reviews I will read for you that I got. So one reviewer said, a highly researched journey through America history. That's what you get. Another said, another reviewer shared that the devotional challenged them to think more deeply about faith, purpose, identity, and God's hand throughout history. That's exactly what I want. I want you to see all of that. But yeah, so all of this was designed ahead of our celebration on July 4th, 250th anniversary of American independence. And I'm very proud of this nation. I'm very proud of how far we've come. There's so much more to conquer, but I think we're doing pretty good. So yeah, that is the devotional. Make sure you get your hands on it. So now joining me today to go through the certain events that are taking place right now. I guess we will start with, I know we're all on the Islamabad MOU, and I want to talk about that. But before we that, I want to insert something that I wasn't originally planning in my outline, and that is Juneteenth. So I want to talk about this because, as we talk about history, I think this is also appropriate. And I want to bring in a good friend of mine to dissect this too and get his insight in it as well as we talk about it. If you guys got questions or comments, I invite you to leave that in the comment section. I do try to see those comments while we're live. Please just keep in mind, I'm not trying to ignore you. We are live on multiple platforms, okay? And I have multiple followers on those different platforms. So forgive me if I miss your comment. Hopefully I'll see it afterwards. But if you have anything you'd like to add to it, feel free. So dissecting this with me before we get into Juneteenth, I'm going to bring in a special guest, Mike Lauber. He is the host of The Insurrection. He's also the CEO of X America News, the very same platform you have me on right now, where I hold a podcast on. This network is connected to some very heavy hitters. We've had General Flynn on and many people in cabinet positions or in government positions on these podcasts. There are key other podcasters outside of, I won't say I'm necessarily a key person, but there are people that have very much, they're prominent in our culture that are leading their own podcasts. And Mike is basically heading all of that and hosts their podcast here on this platform. So Mike, thank you so much for being a part of my episode today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I just want to say real quick on your devotional, like this is an amazing work. I was lucky enough to be able to read it ahead of time or listen to it before it came out. And I do think like you pick some really key events, and a lot of them that don't get discussed, that the divine providence, God's influence over them. Like I think everybody's heard, the story of Washington crossing the Delaware and all the series of miracles that took place to make that possible. The other thing that you really focus on is that this is one nation founded under God, and we do have to always strive to live up to that. Doesn't mean we always do. Sometimes we fail, And I think you also do a good job of highlighting that, some of the flaws and then what we should be learning from them. But great book. Everybody should pick this up. Pick up 2 copies. Keep one for yourself and have a loaner copy, because, again, we want to educate people and bring more people to the understanding of this mentality that being one nation under God is something that we'll continuously have to strive to live up to. It's not always going to be easy. Sometimes that forces you to make the hard choices. And, you know, another thing that people don't really know is, as the founding fathers were crafting the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of our founding documents, the most cited work by them was the Bible. It isn't other historic records
Yeah.
of the Greeks or the Romans or other critical thinkers throughout our history. It was the Bible. All basically like 7 out of 10 times. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. That was their main reference material for how they crafted things. Yes, they looked at the Roman Republic and other things, but the Bible was the underlying work that influenced how our country, the formation of our country, and the primary laws governing the government. Because keep in mind, our Constitution is a restraining document. It's very different than what a lot of other countries
Hmm.
have. It's restraining what government can do to the people, not laying out their powers over the people.
Thank you. Yeah, I had Mike read through this as well. He's a good friend of mine, and I've also learned a lot. You know, meeting with you and talking about politics and things that I and then you sent me resources and materials too, where I could learn documentaries when I started my whole platform in this space of politics, because I was trying to gather as much information as I could, because I felt the Lord call me into this. But I'm like, Lord, if you call me into politics, I got to do so much research, Father. Like,
Yeah.
and so that is kind of what led up to this book, which I was not planning on ever doing. So I didn't know that that would lead to that. So, but been researching and doing that since last year when I first started in politics, and then it led to this. So thank you so much for playing such a major role in that.
Well, thank you for having me. And again, I appreciate your friendship, all the hard work you're doing. Again, you're somebody that's trying to get America set back on a better course, and we need more people like that that are willing to address the hard topics and bring up the realities that a lot of our mainstream media today tries to erase or ignore.
Mm, thank you. Well, I want to talk about Juneteenth because, yesterday was Juneteenth, and I remember seeing this clip from a pastor. I do not remember his name, guys, so please forgive me, but I remember that he did pray, I think, during the time when President Trump was inaugurated, the second round. I
Hmm.
just don't remember his name. He is, I think, a reverend or a pastor. He led a very powerful prayer. And I came across a video of him yesterday saying, I hate Juneteenth. And, he's very vocal on that. And so I decided to do a little bit of, deep diving into Juneteenth and discovering, what is the dissent, what's happening with it, because I already knew. I thank God for the gift of discernment. So I never got involved. For example, I'm saying that because I never got involved in Black Lives Matter, even when it did it when I didn't do any research of why that organization was started, because I felt something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, and when I feel that, I'm just like, let me do some research before I felt the same thing with the Juneteenth thing. I'm like, I'm gonna be gung ho in celebrating it. I need to do some research. So, um, looking at this is the history of this is basically in Juneteenth. This is a celebration of basically there initially it was celebrating the slaves that got freed after signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. They were made aware that they did have that freedom, and I think millions of people got freed in a certain area in Texas. But what they're trying to do is make this more of a national event. And what I saw also is that it seems like the left is trying to hijack this to say that this should be Blacks people Independence Day and not July 4th. If we are going to celebrate something like this, when we're talking about the abolishing of slavery, I think it should be December 6th of that same year of 18, I believe 1865,
Yep.
where we have that the slavery being abolished. That is in the Constitution, that amendment. If we're going to do
No.
that as a national thing, so and then I thought that was interesting, and to just look at the history and see what they're trying to do as implementing this or taking that movement. And I think Charlie Kirk mentioned something like this, but in regards to the civil rights, it's like the initial thought of it, there may be some good in that initial thought, but then people try to hijack it for a greater move that
Yep.
is based almost like anti-America in a sense. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
Yeah, that I think it is trying to hijack something for to sow division. I would much rather have Emancipation Day celebrate either, like you said, on the day the amendment was finalized, or maybe on the day that Lincoln delivered the Emancipation Proclamation. Pick one of the 2 days, and call it Emancipation Day. Because, well, one, if you have a holiday that's just for blacks to celebrate, then obviously like that's not going to unify the country. That's something to sow more division, and that's why the Democrats are trying to embrace this. And it's also like, and I think the pastor is Lorenzo Sol. That's
Lorenzo,
why
yes, thank you, thank you.
he's spoken out about this before, because I've seen other sermons from him, the same thing, same idea, that they want to erase their past, their history, as being the party that fought for slavery, and the party of Jim Crow. This is a way to make that their actual history, their past, disappear. Like you and I were discussing off air, you know the Democrats have always had a target of their aggression. It's shifted over the years. It was blacks, it's been Jews, it was the Irish and the Italian immigrants for a while. Then it got shifted back to blacks in the lead up to the '60s, and the civil rights amendments. But this is a way to sort of dilute that and erase the past, just like they do now. They pretend somehow the parties flipped in the '60s, which, again, that's another lie we can get into at some point, that the two Democrats that flipped and became Republicans were both from the North, and they were both voting with the Republicans for the Civil Rights Amendment, just like one of the Republicans that voted against it. The reason he voted against it was not because he didn't want equal civil rights. He had two positions, or two commentary. One, and this is what Charlie Kirk's gotten at before too, is all we had to do is live up to being a nation that treated everyone equal. Everyone has equal rights under the law, equal protections, blah blah blah. That we didn't need legislation. So that was his primary position. And the other thing that he said was, this doesn't go far enough, and he was right about that. That's why we had to pass the Voting Rights Amendment afterwards. And he called it exactly. He was like, all these southern cities, southern states, the Democrat run ones, they're going to just institute new laws, poll taxes, and other things to make it impossible for the black population to vote once that's been guaranteed. And he was exactly right about that. And of course, what was it, year and a half, 2 years later, something like that, we have to pass a second bill then, because the first one didn't go far enough. But again, like, all that gets erased from our history because it's easier to keep people divided. They want people angry. They want people thinking that things are still unjust. And again, you can't ever legislate away hate. That's never going to happen. There's always going to be individual idiots out there of all races and colors, all religious creeds. There's going to be people that hate for whatever reason they hate for. You're never going to legislate that away. But what you can do is get rid of institutional racism. But, like I've said on here before and other times, the total, like right now, the DHS, or sorry, is it DOJ or DHS? One of the two. They estimate that there's around 10,000 like dedicated white supremacists in a nation of around 350 million. So, that's basically like 12 dudes in a trailer park somewhere in Alabama scattered out through a few states. Like, this is not an organized national movement that's gaining ground or anything else like they're trying to pretend. I mean, we just saw. Yeah. Well, I mean, look what just happened with the SPLC, and we continue to learn more there. They were funding this. The supply of hate does not meet the left's demand for it. So they have to orchestrate fake events or fund it to keep their base fired up. We also know that nearly 3/4 of purported hate crimes are fake. They're perpetrated by the supposed victim or somebody in their immediate circle. And then there's also a small number that are like literal misunderstandings, like the noose in the garage at the NASCAR event, the garage pole. Nobody put that up there with any kind of racial animosity whatsoever. Maybe they could have tied a different knot. Well, honestly, I saw it doesn't really look like a noose. It looked like a, rope somebody tied a loop in, as you would to pull down a garage door. And then that gets blown up into a fake hate crime or incident just to sow up animosity and create division. But yeah, I think unfortunately that's really been what happened with Juneteenth. I think they were, well, one, they were worried about a larger number of black and Latino voters moving into the Republican camp, that Trump's message was very appealing, as others. Even if, saying, look, you've voted this way for the last 60, 80, 100 years, nothing's changed for you. Why not try something else? And also showing results through many of the programs that he put through in his first term. They knew that they were losing a percentage, and in a lot of these cities, they can't maintain power if they even lose 10% of the black or minority vote. So this was really about politics and protecting their own bases. They could care less about Juneteenth. As you said earlier, this is a local holiday in Texas where the last small number of slaves, and again, I should have looked this up ahead of time, but this wasn't. And again, I don't want to like say this is a bad thing because obviously everybody deserved their freedom and should have had it well before that. But this was to celebrate the last few people being released from the burdens of slavery. This wasn't like a national big issue. They just needed something to try to unify their base around, and this is what they picked.
Mm. Yeah, it's just it's interesting how what they do to they keep bringing up this whole race thing every like I
Chance they
remember.
get.
Yes, every chance they get, especially like what Candace Owens once said during election cycles, because it somehow benefits them to keep us divided and this emotional feel of racism still
Yeah.
existing. And I shared with you off camera, I'm like, if you are somebody that if I didn't know God and I didn't have a relationship with Him, I didn't see things through His eyes, and if I were a Marxist or something other, I could see why looking back at history and seeing the atrocities that took place, why I would be upset and angry. You know, why I
Yeah.
would still feel like, oh, I have to execute justice in my own strength, which would a
Yeah.
lot of human beings what we do, because we're flawed, we're not God, is what we do is what we do with injustices is we create more injustices to cover over those injustices.
Yes.
So it's like when we talk about affirmative action, you know, those things like you're creating more injustices to deal with the injustice of
Yeah.
sometimes for even a past that you never lived. So it's just this is the things we try to think of in our own strength to do. And i'm not
Yeah.
i'm not saying you understand I'm black, so it's
Yeah.
like I'm not looking back at history and pretending like it wasn't there, but I'm just saying this the solutions that we see from the left are not going to take us anywhere but down a downward spiral.
Yeah.
It's going to keep this nation in a very divided state. So
Well, yeah.
they're not going to accomplish the goal of making anything right. So not with the policies and plans they have.
Well said. And a lot of what we do see pushing from the left or certain members of the left now is this idea of like revenge racism that oh, we have to have these sort of racist policies today to compensate for something in the past. Well, I mean, again, this is going after the son for the father's sins, or however you want to view it. But I mean, in reality, what we need to have is a level playing field now, like you said. Now, I
Yeah.
do think early on in the 1960s, actually prior to the civil rights bills being passed, when Kennedy initially instituted affirmative action in federal programs, I think that was a good thing then, because we did need to break up the good old boys club. And as others have said, this wasn't just about creating opportunity for blacks and other minorities. It was also about breaking this stranglehold that a few companies had on nearly all government contracts. That this changed the way that whole program was formatted. It created opportunity for many more people across the country, but it was necessary, at least initially, to give people an advantage and allow them to benefit from all those federal dollars. However, like I don't think that same program is necessary today, and I also think that
Hmm.
in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, like the way it's instituted in colleges and other places, like it's directly harmful. Like there's a gentleman, Conrad, I think it's Conrad Black, that he is a black professor up at Michigan. He's been fighting affirmative action going back to the 90s because he's seen the harm that it does to students. If you're giving them 400 extra points on the entrance exam because of their skin color, but then they can't finish this college program, they may have been just fine at another college. But when we're talking like highly prestigious universities that are known for the difficulty of their courses and for the level of education that they give as opposed to a regular public university, you're not helping anybody. If they can't complete the coursework, and they may be a straight A student at another school, but this is for the best of the best. So you're actually harming them in the long run by utilizing this. And I agree with that. Yeah,
You know
and
that California did like a reparations bill a
yes,
few years ago.
yeah, they're
It
still
was,
toying
I,
around
if
with
I
it.
don't quote me if I might be wrong. That's why I'm trying to look it up. But I believe it was $1 million per person.
I think that's where they started. It was San Francisco specifically was the one that passed it and pushed it through. I think it ended up at like 40,000 a person. But yeah, I'm just waiting for that to go through, and then I'm gonna give them an address at a homeless shelter and tell them I identify as black, and then ask for my
Right,
reparations.
right. This is wild. Um,
Yes.
the funny thing is that when I was reading Charlie Kirk's book, Right Wing Revolution, I believe it's in that one because I have a few of
Yes.
his books. He talked about this and how this is a serious thing. Like you're saying, we're saying this is the thing we talked about right here. We're stretching for more, right? It's not just necessarily, oh, apologize for what you did, or let's make this right. You know, we're saying we want money, we want, and I talked to you about this off camera, guys. I'm going to bring this all together. We talked about Booker T. Washington, sorry, George
Hmm.
Washington Carver, and then also W.B. Du Bois, right? We
Hmm.
talked about their different framings. And Booker T. Washington, former slave, started the Tuskegee Institute. And
Hmm.
one thing he was pushing at the time, which I think was definitely needed, I think both of the voices were needed, was he was more for let's build a foundation. Like we're freed now, but you guys still need education. You don't have homes. You need so much. So we're smart people. We're in a great country. Let's use that to our advantage. Let's build some things. And you saw some great things come out of that institute. You saw the Tuskegee Airmen. You saw George Washington Carver, who testified before Congress when it came to peanut, right?
Yeah.
The peanut tariff, I believe.
Yep.
You many men and women did did great work, and George Washington Carver refused to advance. He could have done so many great things too, but I believe he probably felt his calling was to stay at the university. And then Booker T. Washington was invited to the White House by President Roosevelt. So which during that time caused a lot of animosity, and he was never invited again. But he was consulted still by President Roosevelt when it came to racial issues. So we have Booker T. Washington, who wants Black Americans at the time to establish a foundation for themselves, which I imagine like it being like Nehemiah and building the wall, right?
Yeah.
They could have gone to battle and gotten off the wall, but they decided not to, and they still had their weapon in one hand and they were building on the other, but the time and the season was to build. And so I believe Booker T. Washington was right in that. But then you have Du Bois, who was like, no, we should get into civil rights, we should get into activism. He was never a slave. And that was needed, right? Because even when we look at all of the laws that were passed, amendments that were made, we still had, like I mentioned before, the 1955 Emmett Till issue. So there was still some activism that needed to be made because these policies don't change the behavior of the individual people. So
Correct.
that's going to take time because over years, this all they knew was having a slave, a person. I'm trying to think from their standpoint, guys. I try to think from every single angle. So I'm saying this because I don't want you to think that I'm ignorant to the atrocities of slavery. I just wrote a whole
Yeah.
book. so, but what I'm trying to do is understand the thought processes of even of the time, because you think these people were enslaved, so they have to overcome that. And then you have the people that were the people that held the slaves, and so now they, as seeing somebody as not their counterpart, not their equal, they have to now see them as that. And so that's not going to happen overnight for
Hmm.
some, because you
Yeah.
did have people that were Christians leading these movements that already saw the issue before the law was passed and were
Yes.
trying to fight for it. So it wasn't necessarily everybody; it was a huge portion of the population. But in that framing, you see there's a time for each of those things. But then again, when we get to the civil rights thing, we talk about Juneteenth, we talk about a couple of these other issues that are happening. It's like, again, the movement is being hijacked to fit something else, another agenda.
Yep.
And you see this with Black Lives Matter. Even the title Black Lives Matter, if you are ignorant to their founding and what they are actually standing for, all of the incorporations of other things that they bring into the movement, you would say yes, Black Lives Matter. If you didn't do your research, if you work all the time and you're not able to understand what's happening in culture, you could easily fall for someone saying like, and I'm not saying that every case is every policeman is innocent. That's not what I'm saying. But you could, without doing research, come to the conclusion that the people telling you that the police are killing lots of Black people is like a major thing, an epidemic around the country, and it's really, really not. So
Yeah.
you could have come into that agreement without doing any research, right? That's usually how it happens. And my personal experience researching Black Lives Matter, because again, I felt that like, check, like that sounds good. And I heard this eloquent Harvard grad argue his position on BET awards as to they call these different names of people that died at the hands of the police. And so that would fire any Black American up, right? Because you don't, I think any case, I wouldn't want any person, white, Black, Hispanic, etc., to be oppressed in any
Yeah.
form of that, right? But when you are hearing this and you don't do any research, you could literally, somebody could fire you up, and because you just are ignorant, and what their facts coupled with a little bit of deception could seem right to you. So even like Black Lives Matter, when I look into it and I read their website, I'm like, this is a Marxist organization, and they admit it.
Bingo.
And I'm like, this. That's also why I felt like a check. Like, don't get involved in that, Aisha. Like, and I was like, thank you, God, for the Holy Spirit, because if it weren't for you, I'd be in things I shouldn't be in. You know, I can't see myself giving my life for anything else other than the gospel. You know, those things. So when I think about Black Lives Matter and their push and what they're doing, and again,
Well,
they do this through, again, committing more injustices, trashing the
well,
city, you know,
if I could jump
destroying
in
things.
real quick with BLM, it's almost like they have this facade of civil rights up front, and that's what most people see because obviously
Yeah,
Black lives do matter. On its
yeah,
surface, it doesn't seem like a bad thing, but when you look at a lot of what was actually on their website, what the founders, who by the way, Patrice Collars and the others said, I'm a trained Marxist. I don't remember the exact quote that she had on
that's
that.
what she said. Yeah.
And then the literature on there is about abolition of the nuclear family. I don't understand how that has any connection to Black Lives Mattering, but okay. And numerous other things they put on there, or stuff like information from La Raza. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're essentially a Spanish hate group. La Raza is Spanish for the race, and they're a Spanish supremacy group. So they had literature up there from La Raza. Same thing. Like these, they're not about equality or anything else. They're revolutionaries trying to deceive people into donations, which is exactly what they did to further their
Hmm.
agenda, which is
Hmm.
Marxism.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to do our research. We have to be aware of these, you know, these different organizations that pop up, or even these different moves, as and we got to look into why they're saying this. And I like to try to put, you know, like, it's not right or wrong until I do my research. Then I'll take
Yeah.
a stand. So, with that being said, let's get to the Islamabad MOU. This is hot topic right now, guys. You have some
Yeah.
people I've seen in conservative movement that aren't happy with the unfoldings of some of this. You have some people that are. I've seen a lot of my comments on my social media. It still seems like, I don't know. From my perspective, people are still like, of course, with Trump, right? And
Yeah.
I still think he's a great president. I still am proud of my
Oh,
vote.
yeah.
I would have not voted for Kamala, but
Yeah.
you know, what I love and what I'm going to show you guys, I think a little after we talk about the MOU, is a video with JD Vance talking with Megyn Kelly about this and the coalition and how important it is for us to stay together, even with differences, even with
Hmm.
with our disagreements, because you have some people that elected Trump based off of economy, or off of um, endless, you know, no forever wars. There's so many different reasons why we elected him, and sometimes it's, you know, multiple of those things.
Yeah.
And if one of those, if that thing you elected him for to do is not, he's not adding up to that, because you're like 80 million Americans. Not all of us are going to be pleased with the outcomes of the things that he does. It's not going to always be perfect. And I think what JD Vance is communicating is like, that's okay to say that. That's okay
Yeah.
to like, we got people even in the administration that don't agree everything with what's happening, but we are still together, right? So
Yeah.
he was saying like, it's important that we hold the base together, and we discuss those disagreements, and we, you know, we vote and we do those things. So um the MOU, I want to break down a few of the points, okay, and just to kind of give us, it's like 14 points. I kind of tried to make this without having to read the entire framework out, made this as concise as possible. So first one is permanent concession, cessation of military operations, recognition of sovereignty, 60-day negotiation period, Strait of Hormuz reopening, sanctions discussion, oil export provisions, frozen asset provisions, nuclear restrictions, compliance mechanisms, proposed reconstruction framework. Two things I want to say, and I'm going to pass it on to you, Mike. Number one, I do agree with JD Vance when he says that whether or not we get this deal, we still have the upper hand. And when you look at it, that is basically true, because we've
Yeah.
destroyed a lot of, you know, their navy. All those things are destroyed. Their economy is suffering right now, even though they're holding out as much as they can. Uh, we can just, you know, Trump could go in and, like he said, it could bomb them to the gods, right? I'm not going to use
Yeah.
his exact wording. And the second thing is, with these concessions that been agreed to, it is contingent on Iran agreeing and doing exactly what they have agreed to. before they get any of this, before their sanctions released, before any of their own funds, because like they've reiterated again, this is not American dollars, which as the Obama deal was American dollars. Um, Before they get any of that to even rebuild, they have to. They're looking for behavior change, is what they say. Now, my personal thing is, I'm little. My skeptic is not necessarily on Trump. I do want the people advising him to be giving him good information and to do the do the best they can strategically for our nation and the Iranian people. But my thing is also is I JD Vance says the best deal for the American people. I'm a little bit I'm still in between on this one when it comes
Yeah.
to the IOU, only because I love that we did this without any boots on the ground. There was so much achieved, right? And if we look at the beginning of what Trump said, and don't forget that he said no boots on the ground, there will not be regime change. He said that our goal was to make sure that they are not able to build a nuclear weapon. That they're also not able to. He wanted to make sure they can't even acquire one, not 2 years from now, forever. Is what he's saying, like years from now. Um, and he also wanted, I remember him saying something of developing the nation to where the people prosper, but doesn't know if that could happen underneath the current regime.
Yeah.
So there were certain things that I think he covered that I still see here happening. I think the overall thing is, what do we want out of this? Because we're saying we don't want boots on the ground, and we don't like the back and forth of the negotiations because it seemed like Iran's leadership is very unstable when it comes to the negotiations. They say one thing, their propaganda is another thing. But then we don't want boots on the ground, and we say we don't want us to be in forever wars where there's we don't want to be a part of regime change because we saw what that did in the past. But we're acting like we do. So I don't know. I'm still weighing this out. I'm still thinking through this. But Mike, I'm gonna pass it on to you. Let me know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, and I'm a little more skeptical of this agreement because of who we're dealing with and what we've seen, even just in the recent
Agreed.
months. They have no intention of keeping this agreement. I think that should be obvious by now.
Mm-hmm.
And to put a feather in that cap, right now satellite images over the nuclear sites show them building additional bunkers and what appear to be platforms to move back in air defense. So I don't think they plan on keeping this agreement either, or at least that's not what their actions say.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that that if this is upheld at all, it'll be just long enough for them to restructure, and then it'll be back to whatever. They'll find an excuse to violate some terms. They'll blame it on us, and unfortunately, the media will.
Hezbollah or Israel trying to get us to blame it on
Yeah,
Israel for defending themselves because
yeah,
Hezbollah struck them.
well, yeah, and even some of that's been back and forth with. Like with the original agreement, Lebanon was never part of this until all of a sudden Iran brought it in. That was always a separate issue, but Iran's thumbs on the scale there. I mean, they're the ones supplying Hezbollah with money and weapons and everything else that they need to continue to attack Israel. But then again, they want to play like they're the victim in this situation when they clearly aren't. This is the problem that I have with it. Like you can't deal with somebody that's not an honest broker. I do agree that boots on the ground are a horrible idea. That would turn into just a giant quagmire. Not to mention, it would probably unify Iran with some other nations in the area that are a little more to their version of Islam, their persuasion, we'll just say. And the people are going to have to retake their own country. I know we did attempt that, and unfortunately, the Kurds, at least some of them, did not. And again, we don't know exactly how much yet. None of that's come out. But apparently, some of the weapons that we gave them to distribute among the Iranian people just disappeared.
Mm.
Somewhere around 80% of them. So
Wow.
we're in a very difficult position there. At the end of the day, it, I guess this is where I am. Like, I do understand where a lot of the critics are, and I don't think it's fair to lump some people in that are like, okay, no more wars, no more anything. That was what we voted for. No more forever wars, no more entanglements overseas, and to lump them in with people that are like legitimate, like anti-Semitic, hate Israel people, because they're not all the same. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people like my neighbor here that I've mentioned before that he just wants to focus here on America. He doesn't care one way or another about Iran or Israel. It's not that he hates them or whatever. He just wants to fix our problems here at home. And I do get that. But, we're in the situation now, whether you wanted to be or not. Now,
Hmm.
personally, I think we're going to have to finish the job, that you can't have half
That's what I
measures.
feel. I feel that too.
Yeah.
Something's
As
going to
we
have to
already
be done.
we've already gone this far and decapitated their original government, eliminated a lot of their top leadership positions, a lot of terrorists within the country or whatever, and we did give them a chance to come to the table and surrender, and they spit in our face, but we kept
Mm-hmm.
going back to the table. And at some point, when they're signaling that, like they are, that they have no real intention of keeping their side of this agreement, at some point you got to walk away from the table and do something else. I hope that things do work out and they do keep the agreement. I know this is a 60-day pause to come up with better terms
Yeah.
and something all sides can agree to. And we may get that. Like right now, apparently the deal is off again. It's been on and off about 5 times in the last 2 days from one side or another. And I guess now the Iranians are, I don't even know what they're complaining about this time now, because the headline didn't have that in it, and I haven't had time to read the article. But it'll be back on by this evening, trust me, and then
Mm-hmm.
it'll be back off again by tomorrow. Um, Hopefully, we get a 60-day actual ceasefire with none of the three sides violating the terms, and maybe we can get an actual framework for peace. But I think it's good. We're gonna, if they hold the agreement, it's going to be 60 days of them moving weapon systems around and getting prepared for the next round of combat, not actually working towards the goal of peace.
Now, just 2 minutes ago, President Trump posted this on True Social. He said there will be no tolls, on all caps, in the Hormuz Strait for 60 days during the ceasefire period, and there will be no tolls after the 60-day period has expired unless they are imposed by and for the United States of America. Should the deal not be completed for services rendered as the guardian angel to the countries of the Middle East for purposes of both past, present, and future reimbursement of cost. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT.
Well, that's good, and that's addressing one of the concerns a lot of people have had, because Iran's been saying, "Oh, we're going to make a fortune off the tolls and all this. That this is going to be our new income stream."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not how this is going to work.
Yeah.
But I mean, and part of the problem is just the propaganda coming out of the country. But like you and I were discussing off air, I think part of the reason that we're in this situation, we keep going back to the table, is pressure from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other countries around the Middle East. They don't want um, privately, I guess, more so than publicly, because, well, I guess it's a little of both. They don't want Iran's Islamic government removed. One, this would be huge economic competition for them if all of a sudden these sanctions are gone and Iran can export oil, natural gas, saffron, fertilizer chemicals. Sorry, I'm blanking on what those are right now. Um, and pistachios, other industries that are vital to Iran and their interests. They're going to become very wealthy. And a lot of these other countries, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, they've been relying on these sanctions to essentially control the market and keep prices where they want them, artificially high. So that all goes away. And then you
Yeah.
also have the other big factor is freedom. That if Iran goes back to being a free country, only most of their citizens, even though they are Islamic on their birth certificates, they do not practice. Attendance in mosque continues to drop. Prior to our getting involved over there, tens of thousands of mosques have actually been demolished in Iran because nobody goes to them. So, but all of a sudden, if you have this country where people are free, that are not forced to live under Sharia, that's going to spread. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a
No.
lot of countries that are sick and tired of this. That same thing. They don't want to live under this boot of Islam anymore. And if their neighbors are now free and prospering, have access to Western technology, can go outside and not be forced to wear a trash bag, they're going to want the same thing. And I don't blame them. This is one of the things we do have to understand is that there is a much higher level of violence and true believers that believe in the caliphate and want to dominate the world. There's still a lot of families that just want the same things that you and I do. They want their kids to grow up in peace and prosperity and have better opportunity than they had for themselves, and they want the nation to thrive. And I think that's what their real concern is if you have a country like Iran going back to what they were prior to 79, where they were considered literally mini America across the Middle East. I mean, I'm sure you've
Yeah.
seen the pictures of the women at
Yeah.
university and everything else. If they go back to that, that is going to spread.
Mm. Now, I want to change to that clip that we have of JD Vance and Megyn Kelly talking together. And this is more so about the coalition and what's taking place in the Trump administration in regards to the MOU.
All right, now I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance if this clip doesn't run right. We're having some sort of difficulty with the software. So here we go.
President is he's not like viewing these debates from the outside. He's participating in them himself. And again, Megan, the frustration that I've had with, the non-interventionist side has been that the attitude seems to be, we disagree with the president on this policy. Look, we can have that debate, but fine, okay? You disagree with the president on this particular policy. That doesn't mean you can give up on the entire enterprise.
Yeah, no,
and the
I
reason,
agree with
Megan,
that.
the reason why neocons are so much more effective in politics than the people on the other side in our coalition is because they play the game. They get disappointed, they make their criticisms, and they go back and they live to fight another day. Right now, we need everybody who recognizes that this is a good deal for the American people and that we don't want, like John Podolitz is saying, hundreds of thousands of ground troops in Iran. Make your voice heard. This is where you've got to participate in the process. Disagree when you disagree, agree when you agree, but I don't like this idea of the president did something I didn't like, so I'm out.
Yeah.
I think it's a very immature way to approach the political process.
I agree with
and
you.
it's the way to ensure that your enemies always win.
I've been saying the same because a lot of people have been saying that they feel blackpilled by the whole experience. Like I'm just out, and I have been trying to make the point that.
Whoops.
What are your thoughts? That's okay. That's good. That's actually where I wanted to stop.
Oh, good. No, I mean, I agree. Like, you can't just abandon Trump because you're unhappy with one thing the administration's done. Now, that being said, one of the criticisms, one of the issues that we've been seeing is anybody that seems to disagree and with any type of voice gets attacked for it, including, you and I were talking about Benny Johnson when he, separated on a few things, immediately getting a tweet from Trump. I mean, that's something the administration has to accept. There's going to be some dissent, and sometimes it is just people blowing off steam or talking because they're not happy. The other thing, like we were discussing, is some of these are legitimate criticisms. The DOJ is not accomplishing the things that we all voted for. We've got to be honest there and try to address the problem. I think you have to provide them some leeway. Like, largely, I think on immigration, they've done a good deal. The border is now sealed and secure. They have done deportations. Some people
funding. DHS funding.
Yeah. And, but there is a legitimate criticism there, too, that a lot of these deportations are not happening as quickly as people would like. They don't like that ICE is back down in Minnesota and other areas where they've bowed to the mob. And again, those are legitimate criticisms. But rather than attacking the people that make them, maybe explain why we're doing the things that we're doing instead of the more aggressive route or backing away entirely on certain things. It's a mixed bag. It's a little of both. But at the same,
that's why he said. I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
That's why he said at the beginning. We didn't play this part of it. I kind of wanted it to start at a certain place and not. But she did ask him about that, and she quoted Donald Trump basically telling her that she's, not MAGA, because she also disagreed with certain things. But he said, Trump is the first thing he said was Trump is very engaged in these things, like on a personal level as well, as he's also running as the president of the United States. He kind of tried to gloss over or I wouldn't say necessarily gloss over. I think he's trying to maybe interpret the type of personality that Trump has. But again, I do agree with you that when he does say things like that, it does seem like that. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Megyn Kelly. I will be honest. She lost all respect for me when she refused to not be what she said. She's not the mother of the internet, but then she's speaking on everything else except for the whole Charlie Kirk thing. And then there was other things too that I disagree with her on. And I thought that she would be somebody that holds certain principles, but I'm not sure that she does. I think it almost, I don't want to accuse her of anything, but it almost seems like she moves with the clicks. I don't know. And it doesn't give me the right vibe. So I wanted to hear that one because JD Vance was on it, and I wanted to hear his explanation and see if she would ask him the hard questions, and I think that she did. But that's.
And she's like we were talking about, she's shifted around on some of these issues before too, and I guess it kind of depends for me on like how somebody's approaching that. Like, I don't necessarily need to agree with them all the time, but I think they're being intellectually honest and consistent. I can at least respect it. That's kind of what you and I we're talking about with some of the criticisms, again, of what's going on in Iran. Like, I don't necessarily agree with the people, but they're coming at from their perspective from an intellectually honest point that I can at least understand. Like my neighbor, again, that I mentioned, he just doesn't care. He wants to focus on America's problems first. And I get it, especially with the economic turmoil and other things that we're seeing here right now. A lot of these things over the horizon, people are very concerned about that. And we don't want to go back to being, just solving problems overseas while ignoring our own. That is definitely not what we voted for. I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily agree with the perspective. I think things do need to happen. I think sometimes intervention's a good thing, like grabbing Maduro, quick in and out operation. We accomplished a lot. We sent a message, and those are beneficial. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously we have to have some overseas operations. We're the big kid on the block, so it's going to have to happen sometimes. But I also understand the perspective of not wanting to get involved in any other foreign entanglements, especially again military members that I know that served in Iraq or Afghanistan and are looking at what's happening right now. Are like, yeah, all it takes is one change, then it's boots on the ground, and then we're there for 20 years. I don't necessarily agree with I don't agree with that perspective, but I do understand why they have it, and it's not like it's based on flawed logic.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking about this when you were talking, but you know how Trump is basically securing the Western Hemisphere. So that's everything bordering our, the United
Yes.
States. And I remember I was like, was it President Ronald Reagan that also carried that same message?
Yeah.
And it was. So I just looked it up. I wanted to be sure of it when it was against the Soviet and Cuban influence.
Hmm.
So he's taken that similar approach with just securing everything around America and,
Yeah.
uh, the ideals that we share, the economy, and those things as well, from those that want to basically that are chanting death to America or want to basically get ahead of us, like China, when it comes
Yeah.
to this global thing, global dominance. So
And
yeah,
I
I
really like
think
that approach because, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, go. I agree with you. I like that approach too.
Well, it's more important for us to secure our neighbors, the people who are right in our backyard. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want, Mexico is essentially descended into a terrorist narco state. We all know more than half of their politicians are bought off by the cartels. Something's going to be have to done. Something will have to be done at some point to address that, whether that's tomorrow or next year. But we cannot have them existing on our southern border in their current form. Now that
Yeah,
again doesn't necessarily mean boots on the ground, but there's a lot we can do with revealing who's owned by the cartels and who isn't, and maybe some strategic strikes here and there to take out some of these just lunatics that run these cartels. That
yeah,
kind of operation, I think, is not only I mean, I think it's necessary, to be honest. And when you look at all the deaths from fentanyl and everything else, the funnel for immigration, I would much rather have partners in Central and South America that we can get along with and share our values. And that's what we're starting to see. I mean, we've had more. I saw something really interesting that was brought up by a guest, and I think it was the Sean Ryan program that they brought up. You notice that now that USAID has been crippled, all these countries in South America, all of a sudden they're going right. All of a sudden the left can't finance a campaign to save their lives, except for Brazil, which gets tons of money from China. But now you're seeing all of a sudden these right-wing politicians take power, and the people unite behind them because there's no more USAID money for them,
mm,
supporting these communist lunatics. Um, and aside from Brazil, sort of Colombia, but when Honduras, Guatemala, Bolivia, who was basically under the thumb of Hugo Chavez for years and years and years, now they're moving to the right. Venezuela, same thing. That having influence there and friends, and that's not to diminish Argentina and El Salvador for leading the way down there. I mean, we have great allies in Bukele and Javier Milei. And those are the people we need to be uplifting. We need to, if we can advance freedom in the northern and southern hemisphere of the Americas, that sends a message around the world. And I would much rather have
mm-hmm.
allies like that than these bureaucrats that clearly hate us and hate everything we're doing.
Like I even know friends that are from Venezuela that weren't really happy with Trump's immigration policy, of course, because their legal limbo mainly it
Yeah,
was that. Um,
yeah,
that they were like they loved what Trump did in Venezuela when it came to Maduro. They might not agree with him on immigration stuff and they hated him up until that point. And I have, my neighbor, he's Cuban and loves Trump.
oh
He's a
yeah,
big Trump fan. So, you know, those things I think we can't deny because not only are they affecting that country, it's going to bleed into ours. You're talking about greed. It doesn't have a
yeah,
border. So when we're
yeah,
talking about the cartels and all that, they're not just wanting to just take over their country and that be that. This is going to spread.
yeah.
And that is the
Well,
desire. It's greed. That's why they're willing to kill people. They're willing to do different things that harm other people to get the means. So
Well, and you look at like especially the Cuban people. You know, I saw a guy describing this about a week ago, but a Cuban national had came over here on a boat, like a lot of people, to escape the oppression there. He basically described it as a prison colony run by a dictator. I think he's just about right about that. And again, the people want to be free. They are tired of living under oppression, where the best thing your government can give you is a rice cooker. And you don't have consistent electricity. You don't have access to the same amenities that most of the modern world does. That you're having to restore cars from 1954 still. And they blame us for an import-export ban. But again, that's not reality. They can't create anything themselves under the current government they have there because it's oppressive. And same with a lot of South America. They're tired of these strong-armed thug dictators looting from the treasury, enriching themselves while oppressing the people and allowing for these cartels to essentially seize power in the country and be the dominating force. People are sick and tired of it. And now is an opportunity to free millions and millions and millions of people in South America.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do much at all. All we have to do is put our finger on the scale here and there. We don't need to invade anybody. All we have to do is provide financial incentive and maybe a Hellfire missile here and there.
Now my question is too, because Trump is very unique in the Republican Party, where there was a lot of endless wars under Republican Party, and then Trump comes in as a different message and a different stance. He's actually doing that, even currently. But my question to you: what are your thoughts on? Do you think that Trump, with this move with the MOU, because he was very quick to sign it? Remember, J.D. Vance was supposed to sign it on yesterday, but Trump moved to sign it, like they believe, during the G7 or something like that. He signed it earlier, basically. So do you think that he is thinking of the midterms? Do you think that he's thinking of the prices, affordability? Do you think he's wanting to avoid going to Congress and, saying we got to go to war? What are your thoughts on?
Well, it's probably a combination, but I think the main one is wanting the Straits of Hormuz reopened because there's a lot of pressure from countries that are legitimate allies of ours, like Japan and the Philippines and others, that are suffering because the straits are closed. In the Philippines, gas is right around $10 a gallon equivalent US. And, that is, again, not affordable, but it's because of who they were buying the fuel from and the fact that the straits are being held hostage by the Iranian government. So I think that's a big part of it, is wanting relief, both for us here, prices at the pump. If they haven't crashed already where you're at, they're going to come back down now that the straits are open. And you're already starting to see that in the lead up to this. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is price relief here and abroad. But it's also, again, hoping that they can set the stage for an actual agreement. And I don't know what is actually going through Trump's head on this, because, like you and I discussed, like, I don't think we can make a real agreement with the Islamic Iranian government.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not honest brokers. They're going to do what they want. They're going to twist things around to their favor. They're going to, they'll probably instigate more attacks on Israel than Israel's forced to respond, and then they'll blame them for breaking the ceasefire.
And then want us to blame them too for ruining the deal. When it's
well,
not
that's
necessarily. But we see this consistently with the Iranian regime. I'm not going to say Iran because it's not necessarily the people leading. We see this consistently where they don't take accountability for anything they do.
No.
It's like they blame it on you, are the reason that they did this. You are the reason.
Well, and they're so quick to point out the one or two times where Israel was the one that violated some part of an agreement first. That's what they focused on, even though 9 out of 10 times it's the Iranians doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, we should wag our finger at Israel for dropping bombs or sending a strike after a ceasefire was supposed to have already implemented. They shouldn't have done that. There's one other incident, I'm blanking on which one it was now, that was outside of the terms of what they agreed to. Okay, fine. Don't do that, Israel. Trump obviously yelled at Netanyahu about it. Everybody heard about that.
Yeah,
but you do have to have both sides be compliant. But 9 times out of 10, it's the Iranians, or the Iranian government. It's not Israel. So take some accountability there too. But they won't. And unfortunately, our media will portray it that way. They are going to conveniently forget about all the violations from Iran and focus on the one or two where Israel overstepped their bounds. Let's be honest about it. They shouldn't have done those things. They agreed to do something else. Now, them defending themselves, I am totally for. If they're getting rockets fired at them from Lebanon, they have to respond. They have to protect their own people. So I'm not including any of that in this. But it's also just so hard over there in the Middle East because tensions run so high, and this has been a conflict that's going on for not decades but centuries, and I don't think you can really have a real agreement with the Islamic Iranian government. Just not
Hmm.
possible.
Yes, I agree. I too. I don't know how it's. I mean, even though he just destroyed like two levels of leadership,
Yeah.
it's still just very corrupt. It seems. So
Well,
I
it's
don't know. I
religious
can't say I want to
fervor.
applaud them for trying diplomacy, but
I think Trump had to, at least initially. And when you talked about, having to get a declaration of war from Congress, that's
yeah.
not going to happen. And Trump knows that.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, there are too many weak-kneed Republicans that will block it, even though they would normally love to go to war. But there's too many of these neocons that all of a sudden they're going to come out against it and side with the Democrats just to make things difficult. Um, I think it was very smart what he did initially, doing 58 days of strikes and then backing off and trying to bring them to the table for a ceasefire or peace agreement, because
Yeah.
right now it's a 60-day window before he has to notify Congress and get their approval. So a lot of people were speculating that may be why we did that. But I also think
Hmm.
when you threaten consequences and they
Yes.
violate the agreements, you have to follow through on that. That's been kind of one of my
Yes.
disappointments with this, is at the last minute Trump's canceling strikes. At some point, you have to realize what they're doing. They're only coming back to prevent further pain. They have no
Hmm.
intention of keeping this agreement, and I don't like hitting power plants and things like that affect the people unless it's ones that are tied just to their military. But I do think going in and destroying another round of their leaders, I mean, you got to know we're tracking every one of these people by satellite right now. Hitting their
Yeah.
leadership again, or their military bases, I'm just fine with that. If they walk away from the
Yeah.
table or violate terms of a ceasefire, hit them hard. Make sure they don't do it again. And eventually, maybe their own people will rise up and do something there.
And this is where I want to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, because what we see him
Yeah.
do with foreign policy is he understands what his moves mean to even the rest of the world and those are adversaries, right? So
Yeah.
every move that he's made, he understands the strength that has to be projected so that they understand that their ambition has to be halted while he's president, right?
Yes.
So I think out of all presidents, he understands that clearly, at least over the last few years. So that's why I'm like, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because that's been a consistent thing, the moves that
Yeah.
he made. So we'll see how this goes, and maybe he's got something up his sleeves that he's not revealing, because this is
That's a
also consistent.
possibility.
So, like we didn't know Maduro was going to be taken out, right? That came at a huge surprise.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and again, he did not do a regime change because we saw the failures of that from the past. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I'm ready to give him the benefit of the doubt because of his track record, you know, and
I, I, I,
the
I do agree with that. I just wish some of the times we make a threat, you have to carry through. So I wish you would be a little
agreed.
more heavy handed sometimes, especially in a few of these recent incidents where it was clearly the regime violating the terms of the agreement, attacking Israel or attacking U.S. military bases
Yes.
or
Yep.
other Gulf states, and then backing off at the 11th hour saying, oh, well, they're back at the bargaining table. I don't care if they're back at the bargaining table at that point. They have to suffer the consequences of their previous actions,
Hmm.
especially when it's over and over like this. So next time, if they walk away or they try to make fools of us by backing out of this memorandum sometime in the next few weeks, it's got to be gloves off, or we're the fool at this point.
Yeah. I think, well, let's wait and see. I do have hope. I think that is, I don't know. I think that this is going to be, I'm hopeful it's going to be good and in the best interest of the American people,
Yeah,
and Iran, the Iranian people. Well,
yeah,
as we get to a close here, I just want to remind you guys one more time. Though today was supposed to be the official launch of my new book, One Nation Under God, 250th Anniversary of American Independence, to release today, it is still under review because it's kind of a massive project. So it's still under review on Amazon. But if you are subscribed to my newsletter, once it becomes available, I will make sure that an email goes out to you and that you also are aware of the special 40% off discount that you get as an early bird purchaser. So you'll have that available to you as well. So make sure that you subscribe so you can get on the newsletter as well. Very proud of this book. I think it's very timely. And again, I never imagined doing anything like this, but I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the work. I'm very proud of the people that reviewed it, the people that gave me their endorsements. that took time to look through it and give feedback. So it's come together. It's massive. It's 286 pages, guys, but the source page is what really extended it because I wanted to make sure I included public sources again that you didn't have to necessarily go out and purchase a book or something to get more information on a specific historical event. So I wanted to make sure that that was easily accessible to you. So that's also included in the book. So if you wanted to look up any historical event from 1776 to 2026 that it covers, you would be able to easily do that. In the back of the book, there'll be those source pages. So I do hope if you get it, it blesses your socks off. Make sure to leave a review and let me know what you thought about it. But subscribe to the newsletter so you can be updated. I believe it should be going live in the next day or two, I hope. But thank you guys so much for joining us, Mike. Thank you so much for being a part of today and discussing the headlines, what's taking place, and what we, a little bit what we can expect and how we should be thinking through these things. I appreciate your
Thank you for
insight.
having me. Always happy to be here. You do a great job. Lots of insight, great commentary. And guys, again, make sure you get this book, get 2 copies, because you're going to want to have a loaner out there. Somebody's going to borrow it and they're going to forget to return it.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.